I think it's recording. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Good evening, everyone. I am Giuseppe Forino. I'm a lecturer in human geography at the University of Salford. So I'm based in Greater Manchester. So my talk is about climate change and cultural heritage in North Wales, complex link. So you would wonder why an Italian scholar based in the UK is talking about Wales. It's because it was as Lenny was saying, I spent here quite a good 16 months as a lecturer in human geography and had the opportunity to work with some colleagues, particularly with Linda, but also with other people. And actually what I'm going to present is the work I did when I was in Bangor, as well as the legacy of this work when I moved in the University of Salford. And needless to say, I'm still working on the topic. I come more or less once, twice per year in Bangor to work with Linda. And it's nice to see some familiar faces between colleagues, some students. Very happy to see some students from first year when I joined, now still being here. That's very, very good news. Yes, why a complex link? Because as a geographer, I think the keywords that I also say to my students is complexity. So understanding the relationship between physical and social environment, political environment, also always with an analytical and critical lenses. So the outline, I'm going to present 3 projects that I undertaken together with Linda since 2023, between 2023 and 2024, and of course now we are trying to, again, to develop a research agenda based on this, as well as some, hopefully some publications soon. There are some publications I will show you during this presentation. So one is the Clicker project, which took place between February and January and April 2023, and then interdisciplinary network for climate and heritage, which took place at the end of 2023, and then a small project called Shore to Shelter, funded by NERC for public engagement for environmental sciences. This took place in March, April 2024. And then I will talk about some joint consideration for considering the linkage between cultural heritage and climate change from a multi-actor perspective. Why a multi-actor perspective? Because when we have to manage places as well as space, of course there are different actors interacting with their own different visions, views, interests, as well as expectations. And of course, because geography is the science of complexity, holding all those different views, sometimes very contrasting and conflicting, is never easy. So I'm just showing some, let's say, reflections on how those different perspectives merge together in managing some specific aspects of North Wales, such as the cultural heritage as well as its relationship with climate change. So first of all is the Clicker project, which was, again, a project on how the risks from climate change to cultural heritage can be better communicated to different audiences. Was also funded by the NERC, which is the Natural Environment Research Council. Yes. So essentially is a funder, is a sort of research funder for environmental topics, social environmental topics, and it's one of the usual funders where we always apply to try to get some funds to do our own research. So the research question was how we can give a value to cultural heritage in order to help the public understand climate change. the research team. I'm going quite fast. Okay, all the things I'm going to present today, as I mentioned before, they have been done with Linda. However, there were other people from the university, from Bangor University. For this project, there were also Gary Robinson and Martin Austin from archaeology and the School of Ocean Sciences. There were other, there was the second project on interdisciplinarity where there were other people from Bangor as well. So what we did for this Clicker project, we created three that are called work packages, so 3 stages of activities, let's say. We organized the first work package was the organization of some workshops to engage with different local stakeholders. We also did an outreach event where we tried to communicate, synthesize our research findings to the stakeholders. And we had about 70 participants across 3 meetings, which for short projects, a small project like that, was quite a good result. There were also in this case participating colleagues from Bangor University, but also some students, even some students from geography. I think some of them were your colleagues. So we brought together, so the research team was an interdisciplinary team because, of course, I'm a human geographer. Linda is a physical geographer. There was an archaeologist. There was ocean science expert. There were also a few research assistants from a couple of other schools. So it was an interdisciplinary project, and we tried to bring together this multi-actor perspective. So academics, but also policymakers. We had some people from a few local councils. We also had some practitioners working on climate change, let's say on climate change response, as well as from a cultural heritage point of view. So I think it was quite good to have different views, as well as some representatives from communities. So we did these workshops in February at the Snowdonia National Park. I think changed. I don't know if they changed the name, so I'm sorry for the. I don't know what's the current name. Okay, better not. Okay, I don't want to mess up with Welsh. So we did these 2 workshops in almost more than 2 years ago. We wanted to talk with these actors, with these multiple stakeholders about their experiences of climate change and cultural heritage. We did a couple of facilitation activities, and then we did breakout groups. So we divided all the participants in 4 groups, if I remember correctly, and we had small discussions. Then at the end, we tried to bring all together. These were events for data collection. So I don't know how much you talk about, engaging with stakeholders, particularly in first year in terms of research. I suppose with particularly do research method, you talk a lot about focus groups, facilitation methods. However, the discussion allow us to collect data. So people tell us things, tell us stories, share their own experience and knowledge, and that became data for us that we use for understanding the complexity, let's say. An interesting thing was that we also contacted some drawing artists that helped us summarizing the findings, and it was very, very interesting. It was my first time, so they were drawing their impression of the conversation while we were talking, and I will show later which was the result. And I think probably this is a very visual representation of the complexity and also the contradictions of topics, hot topics, particularly in this part of Wales, such as cultural heritage and climate change. So we did breakout groups in those workshops in February. So we wanted people talking about their experience and personal experience and narratives of perceptions of climate change and cultural heritage. What do they identify as climate change issues, but also what do they think can be some potential solutions for protecting cultural heritage from climate change related risks. And of course the goal, again, to understand the experiences and perceptions of climate change and cultural heritage, to explore the issues that people think local cultural heritage has, and how to address the climate change issues related to cultural heritage. And also to determine best practice, to identify solutions, but also to communicate better with people, because very often we as a scientist, we think to be in an ivory tower where we use our own jargon, our own terms to identify and talk about the topic, but then the big issue is when you are going to talk with people that don't speak your same language, how do you communicate this to people? And honestly, it is, I mean, from my experience, it's something that is quite underestimated in some areas of research. So how we can better communicate, how we can translate very scientific academic information / jargon in a easier and more communicable way to different actors which don't speak our same language, but which also think completely different from us about the topic. So let's try to give a complex view to cultural heritage in North Wales. Needless to say, cultural heritage means different things for different people, and of course consists of natural features as well as anthropogenic features, monuments, landscapes, beaches, churches, tourist monuments, but also small things that are not identified as cultural heritage, as we will see in a second. So there is a cultural heritage, there is historical heritage, geological heritage, and who manages this cultural heritage? Well, there is a complex governance. I don't necessarily mean more complex than other parts, but of course there are different layers and sectors that contribute to manage cultural heritage. Of course, you have the Welsh government, but you also have local governments, you have different heritage bodies, you have the Archaeological Trust, the National Trust, national parks, and so on. But also you have different stakeholders. Of course, cultural heritage is you need policy making to manage cultural heritage, but let's not forget that cultural heritage, particularly in tourist areas of Wales, is also a leisure and tourist attraction, let's say. So, I mean, it's also considered a profitable activity. But let's not forget that a lot of cultural heritage is really part of feelings and emotions of people. So they are really attached to cultural heritage item, asset, big, small, because people have memories of that, or it's a physical demonstration of their place attachment. Another thing is that cultural heritage is not always visible. There is something that some stakeholders identify as a sort of hidden heritage. Physically hidden, so something that you don't immediately see, and can be something below water, such as submerged or ancient forest, peat deposit, but also shipwrecks. But also hidden heritage, at least from my perspective, is also what is hidden from an emotional point of view, and it's something intangible. It's something that institutions or even people different than some people might not understand. Why? Because this cultural heritage is related to the feelings that individuals or communities experience every day in their everyday life. It can be, again, walking on a beach with the dog, or it can be a bench where they sit to talk with each other, or is a place which is connected to past memories, or can be a meaningful place for a person. So we understand that cultural heritage now has a complex and you know, a bit difficult, as a meaning that is sometimes difficult to disentangle, because cultural heritage really can mean different things for different people. So emotions not always are part of our conversations in terms of service provision, in terms of environmental management, in terms of cultural heritage management, or in terms of climate change response. However, what we feel, what we experience, what we say is part of how we conceptualize and live space. So which were the risks related to climate change that people considered yeah, exactly as threat for cultural heritage? Well, of course, flooding, sea level rise, particularly in coastal areas, but also pollution, which is something that, of course, is related to climate change by emissions, but also the environmental changes. Probably in your own, even in your life, in the place where you were born and grew up, you can see that there have been environmental changes in 20, 30, 40 years. And of course, the older the people are, the more people can remember how places changed across years. Not always places change for good, sometimes they change for bad, right? There are also new development areas in places which are at risk of erosion, and of course, tourists, but not just tourists, play an important role here. And so it was clear that there was a need for updating or retrofitting infrastructure, for updating policies, and for improving local planning, regional planning, strategic planning, and so on. The last point to mention is tourism. Of course, some areas, particularly in the North Coast, in the coastal North Wales, have a sort of seasonal tourism, which of course is an opportunity for employment, for jobs, even for you know, exchanging knowledge, but is also a challenge, and we will see in a second. It's a challenge for public transportation, it's a challenge for pollution, and of course, for those of you who live here, probably you know even much better than me. So which were the government's voices? So as I mentioned, there were some policymakers which participated to these workshops. I think there was Greenet Council, Conwy as well. So there were a few councils. And it's interesting, and here you start to see the complexity of these issues, because they see cultural heritage and climate change in terms of statutory provision, so what the council can do by, let's say, by law or by mission, and what cannot do because it's outside its sphere of influence or its mission, let's say. They were also mentioning, of course, everyone working in public administration, even us working at the university, we say that there are resource constraints, so not everything that you want to do, you can actually do, because you need to make some priorities based on the budget. So they always mention this expression, within the budget. We can do a few things, and the few things must be within the budget that we have available. And this, of course, means that you need to make some priorities, right? And these priorities were mainly based on economic assessment. So they were talking about the return of investment. So if I spend £100,000 on a defense or retrofitting an infrastructure, how much is what are my benefits? Not just in monetary terms, but also in terms of, I don't know, transportation, tourism, visibility, and making happy the taxpayers, right? So the cost-benefit ratio needs always to be positive. So you spend something, you need to have something in return, which is probably higher than what you spent. Okay. We talked, well, at these meetings also some practitioners came, so some bodies, archaeological bodies and cultural heritage trusts were represented. Also in this case, they were talking about cultural heritage as a mission, or the statutory requirement. But they also started to give a more complex view of cultural heritage. So where the policymakers were mainly talking about cultural heritage as something to be protected in terms of the mission of the government, but just some assets. These bodies recognized heritage like something beyond the tourist landmark, I don't know, the Perrin Castle or the things that you find on leaflets for tourists in this area, or the tourist hotspots. So they will start to give this idea of cultural heritage as something more intangible and sometimes difficult to classify, exactly because of what I was saying. So people have different views of climate change or cultural heritage. Heritage for, I don't know, for an individual can mean something different from what I mean as cultural heritage, because they have a place attachment or they have some feelings about space, a place, or a memory about something that they consider important for their everyday life. Also in this case, they were talking about resource constraints, but of course this is, this is for granted, right? So, and this is a big question. So how we can really protect all cultural heritage if we know that we don't have enough budget? So how we make decisions, how we prioritize. Now, I'm sorry to say that I don't have a solution. Sometimes I say geographers create more problems than solutions. But again, this is something that you can also think, particularly for first-year students, how to do things, protect the environment, when you know that that is the only money that you have available and you cannot do everything you want, right? So, as mentioned, there were some community representatives, few people particularly from Bangor. Of course, they mentioned the huge attachment they have for cultural heritage in North Wales, but they were also, I would say, also a bit criticizing us because, at the end we were mainly talking about cultural heritage, and we brought the clear example of tourist hotspots, I don't know, the Perry Castle, or something significant for Welsh, how can I say, something that is also quite known outside of Wales, but actually they were saying, well, cultural heritage is not just the main spots and tourist destinations, right? Cultural heritage is actually mainly and foremost our everyday life places. Again, people can walk on a beach with friends or with dog. They can clean up the beach. They can socialize in a small square, or even a local pub, can be part of cultural heritage. So how we can express this complexity when we talk about cultural heritage, as well as climate change. Of course, they also recognize climate change and climate risk for cultural heritage. We always say that people still don't understand what climate change is. No, they understand what climate change is. Probably they don't have our framework-ish, let's say, or our overarching perspective on climate change, but they know quite well how environmental changes, including climate change, is impacting on their everyday life. And we will see later what they say about this. And they are also committed in protecting cultural heritage because they are doing something for their places. So these are, okay, this is one of the drawing from the artists. So again, the artists were actually drawing these while we were talking. So in 3 hours, they were able to make most of it. And now, I'm not going to the details of this because we can spend 10 hours talking about this. However, it's just important to say how many topics came out when we just mentioned the cultural heritage. Sometimes even controversial, and I'm not saying that everything that is written here probably makes sense. Something can be a bit more controversial. Something can be a bit too stretched or too extreme. However, that's not the point. The point is, when you just mention cultural heritage and climate change, there are a lot of things coming up, from intersectionality to tourism to agriculture to relationship between rural and urban areas, policies, anything you can think of. So this is one, and this is another one. So there's two different workshops and two different drawings. So responsibility, storytelling, engagement, different type of heritage, local language, cultural identity. There are tons of keywords that, I even probably in 10 hours I cannot explain. But again, I'm not here to provide a clear answer to anything. I just want to show you how it's complex to talk about this issue in, I can say, in a small place such as Northwest, right? So we did an outreach event here at Bangor University where we tried to put together all the information / data we collected in these two workshops. So around 35 people joined us. Also in this case between academia, policymakers, there were also some practitioners, sorry, I didn't write here, as well as local communities. So those were some of the activities we did. So we used some keywords, I don't know, hidden heritage, threats, cultural heritage, tourism, inclusion as input for people to talk or to reflect about. We gave them some post-its and they put on the wall, and those are other data that we are using. Also, by seeing the drawing on the wall, they started to talk with each other. Even people they didn't know each other. I think here there is a tourist, and there are all different people. There are representatives from different stakeholders, right? Different actors. So we have students, we have policymakers, we have academics. They didn't know each other, but when they looked at the drawing on the wall, they started talking with each other. And what's better than this, right? So they started, reflecting together, writing their post-it and sticking on the wall. And yes, we still have, and we are still using. So from this, we were also able to publish a blog on geography directions. I don't know if probably my colleagues mentioned it, but in case you don't know, Geography Directions is a blog from the Royal Geographical Society. There are a lot of things written in a very informative way for academic rigor, but for larger audiences. So please give it a look. And this was also translated in Welsh. So at the end, I think it was something good to communicate with different audiences. So this is one activity. This is one project that we did. I think I can say that we all started from this project. I'm going to talk quite briefly, also for sake of time, about two other projects. One was the Learning Society of Wales Interdisciplinary Network for Climate and Heritage, so between September and December 2023. So we created an interdisciplinary network of researchers, not just researchers, because we were mainly academics, but we were not just academics. There were also some practitioners working at the intersection, cultural heritage practitioners which of course were also working a lot on climate change. And I mean, at the end was a sort of brainstorming about how we can promote an interdisciplinary understanding and an interdisciplinary engagement about this topic, which is also innovative and methodologically sound. Again, I don't think we were able to come up with an answer in just a couple of meetings. However, it was good to reflect together, and also in this case, we were able to publish something again on geography direction. So we proposed a sort of interdisciplinary research agenda for climate change and cultural heritage. I'm going to summarize soon what I'm going, the results of everything. The third project was Shore to Shelter. Was actually was how can we define exhibit? Outreach event with some with local communities. It took place between March and April 2024. Again, we wanted to communicate the linkage, the linkage between cultural heritage and climate change. The main thing, also in this case, people was able to say what they wanted to say, and also provide post-it where they can write their thinking. We also give them some leaflets where they can they could write something and give back, send us by mail. Unfortunately, I cannot show the back. We received quite a few of them, but unfortunately I cannot show them because there are the address of the people, and of course I cannot show them. However, there were very interesting things. So again, I just went through this just to show that with a few small projects here and there, we were able to, to create a sort of research agenda and hopefully a medium long-term engagement about this topic. So very quickly, so is the public responsible? Yes, of course the public feel responsible. Communities are not, very often I don't want to say all of us as academic, but let's say academic environment don't think that communities are able to understand academic things. Actually, they understand quite well. They also respond to climate change, even though they don't label as a climate change response. So they do what we can define non-climate change labeled actions. For example, they can work to maintain the neighborhoods in good state. They can take care of each other at the local level, taking care of the most vulnerable, creating community networks. This is adaptation to climate change, even though we don't believe so, but actually is part of response to climate change. They discuss local issues with local policymakers. They can clean beach. They can maintain the neighborhood in good state. So this is part of bottom-up adaptation or climate change mitigation. But also it's not just climate change, and this is an important point. Very often we think climate change is something separated from the other human actions. No. To respond to climate change, you don't have just to respond specifically to climate change, but you need to have sustainable transportation, place accessibility, education, regular maintenance infrastructure, planning, sustainable tourism. So climate change is part of a bigger picture of everyday life. Okay, this is why I say non-climate change labeled actions, because to sort it out, the climate change crisis, we need to work on our everyday life, not just on big actions from governments, of course. We just had another failing conference of parties in Belém in Brazil, where, of course, a government didn't take responsibility. This is super important. Of course, we must have a global agreement about climate change, but things that we do locally also count a lot. And also, who have the knowledge? Who can have valuable knowledge about climate change, cultural heritage? Well, we as academics always say that we have expert knowledge. Of course, we study, we are frustrated with publishing, funds, blah, 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 blah. But we often think that we are the only people who have knowledge about climate change. However, that's not true, particularly for in general about academia. Very often we rely on a top-down driven communication. So it's us telling other people what is climate change. Particularly when you talk about climate science, there is a huge reliance on data, scenarios, projections, which are super important, but it cannot be just like that. And also, the academic jargon very often does not match the academic languages. If we talk about resilience, I can tell you, if you talk with your butcher, they don't know what resilience is. So some language, Spanish, even they don't have a translation for resilience, right? And also, we don't put the general public in the condition to claim their voice, okay? So how we can have a dialogue with the people who pay our wages, actually, taxpayers, right? The people who we should work for. So we believe that there should be a diversity of stakeholder voices. So of course, you need to have a rigorous academic approach, but you also need to have a wider communication to the general public and try to incorporate them into the discussion. Policymakers, they have very often a functional or technocratic view of climate change. So this is my mission, this is my budget, this is what I have to do, that's all. So they have a very rational, very often economically rational vision of climate change and cultural heritage, which is, I mean, it's understandable from the point of view of service provision from an institution. However, they could be open to less tangible approaches, right? The feelings, emotions. When you talk to them, say emotions of people, well, they say people are emotionally, so they are not rational when they talk about climate change. That's wrong. Emotions are part of everyone. Even people who say they have no emotion. No, they must have emotions because they are human beings, right? On the other side, the approach by community has always been considered experiential, emotional, which is true. And of course, we don't have to romanticize community views because not always we as individuals or we as community say real things. Sometimes we say stupid things that we just believe they are true because, you know, we are human beings with all our own limitations. However, we could recognize the practicality, feasibility, and operationalization of some policy actions or some economic rationale. So again, how we can put together this different views from different people. Openness for sure is what is key in this sense. And I can say that not always we are open to listen to each other and to act with each other. Probably I am the first one not to be open. However, again, I think this sort of how can I say, flux of conscience, right? Reflecting on how we can do better as academics, as policymakers, as well as communities. So, can we have a more inclusive perspective when we talk about cultural heritage, climate change? So, not just technocentric approaches. So, okay, data, okay, scenarios, okay, evidences, they are still essential, but can we also let people talking? Can we also let people having their own voice? Can we use storytelling as of people as a way to understand better a phenomenon and also to incorporate into policies, which is extremely difficult, right? But again, probably we need to do something different. Imagination and art, the drawings we did were so powerful. I mean, I did not expect, I think Linda probably had already some experience, but for me it was the first time using art in this way. I had that experience using art, but not like this. And it was so powerful because just with the drawing, I mean, people just looking at the wall, but with the drawing, and people start to talk with each other. And it was, you know, this created a lot of talking with each other, but also willingness to understand and talk with you more and to say their voice, right? So everyday life stories are scientific data. And I know sometimes it's difficult for some part of academia to understand, but what people say is our data for us to understand better a phenomenon. So instead of being profit-centered or, how can I say, priority-centered. We should be more life-centered in terms of understanding how the world works and how much the world is complex. So diversity is the key, engaging different type of actors. Expert knowledge is important, our knowledge, but also the other expert knowledge of communities of other people is important as well. So people have their knowledge too. Again, let's not over-romanticize it. Let's filter the type of information, but like we should filter our own knowledge as well. Tangible and intangible inputs don't clash, right? So the rational perspective of the policymakers and the emotional or feeling, whatever you want to call, perspective from people, they don't clash, they can work together. We should still have a rigorous approach as academics, but we should also be able to communicate more easily. And of course, I'm not going to talk about the Welsh language, but of course here, Welsh language is a question of identity and must be considered when you communicate with local communities. So data are important, but so is creativity of people. And of course, one size doesn't fit all. This old mantra of academics trying to find solutions. There is no solution that is good for every context. There are a set of solutions that need to be contextualized within the local realities. Some references. Perfectly on time, folks. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, just send me an email. Thank you very much for listening. Should I? So, Panopto, stop.